Good morning, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'll be reviewing for you the gist of this game is that the characters are aware that they are playing a game. Now, I don't mean that in like the meta sense, like games like Undertale would say, where they're like, oh, haha, it's a video game. But I mean that they've set up a game in their world that is clearly inspired by The Legend of Zelda, especially Breath of the Wild, and the game is not shy about making that abundantly clear. They don't even try to hide it. They'll say things like, every hero needs to have a pointy hat and a sword, or searching for yellow triangles is just part of what a hero does. And you even get a paraglider and can shield surf. Yeah, it's definitely not shy about its influence, and I think that was intentional because they knew that Breath of the Wild was such a popular game. This came out in the same year as Tears of the Kingdom, so they probably wanted to capitalize on that hype. There's also a strong resemblance to a game I reviewed in 2020 called A Short Hike, which is also an open world exploration game that has a very similar art style, except that this game is in 3D, so it kind of fleshes out the style of both games, but in a more child-friendly way that also has a fair amount of adult messages, not inappropriate messages, but stuff more geared toward the older audience so that pretty much anyone can relate. So you move around in 3D space, and although you don't really start out with much, you eventually get a sword, a shield that you can use for shield surfing, a shirt that's your paraglider, and a bracelet that lets you climb walls. Eventually you'll get other items as well, such as projectiles. But for the most part, the controls are kept pretty simple. The game controls really well, the camera controls are quite amazing and very responsive, and the game tries to make you feel as relaxed as possible, because Breath of the Wild could be a pretty demanding game, and this game doesn't really punish you for anything. And I mean that in both the game design and also just the general flow of everything. You have no health bar, no time limit, no fall damage. The enemies don't even attack you. They're just pieces of cardboard that are designed in a very childlike way to look like monsters, and you can just hack them away with your sword, no troubles whatsoever. The game also doesn't even have any loading screens. It's a fully open world game, so it doesn't even punish you by loading in. Really, the only thing I can think of that could be a potential punishment is that there's no map, and the quest trackers only appear when you're in the vicinity of the person who gave you the quest. But apart from that, it is probably one of those games that those ultra-feminine gaming YouTubers would call a cozy game and have a bunch of hearts and ooh symbols, which is not necessarily a bad thing, as I really loved the element of just being able to wander off in any direction and seemingly every couple of seconds make some kind of discovery. Now, the goal of the game is that you're supposed to build up a playground to make it look like a medieval fantasy setting, like turn a regular slide area into a juice bar, for example. And you do that by talking to characters throughout the island, and you can do both main quests and friend quests. The friend quests are for the most part pretty simple. You find a character, the character has a request, and you do it. And you might be groaning at that, thinking, oh no, Breath of the Wild had terrible side quests, but they're pretty manageable here. Sometimes the objective is literally just a couple of feet away, but because the characters are so into the fact that it's a game, they'll embellish it and give you some kind of convoluted reason as to why to do it. Like, there's one character that says that he's allergic to pots, and even though the pots are close to him, he says, oh, the ceramic stuff is going to cause me allergies, so legendary hero, save me from the pots. So they very clearly want you to enjoy the process rather than dreading it. Now, the main quests are a little bit more clunky than you would expect in this kind of game, as you often have a bunch of characters around, and you'll have to solve each of their problems in order to complete a main quest. Then a board will appear in the playground, and then all of the friends that you recruited in the friend quests will work together to create that building. And usually it only takes 10 friends, And the game has quite a lot of characters. In fact, you don't even need to help all of them in order to beat the game. And generally, I never found a point where I didn't have enough children to be able to help me build a project. Unless if you're just really not observant of where the characters are, that shouldn't be a problem. A lot of times they'll even shout out for you when you're close by so that you have a general idea of where they are. So even that isn't really challenging. The thrill of movement is also really nice in this game. It starts out a bit slow, but once you get the main equipment, it really flows really nicely. Like you could go into a shield surf and then be able to bounce off the water like you're a skipping rock, and then quickly transition into getting into the paraglider, which does not take stamina, unlike Breath of the Wild, so you can totally abuse it. Climb to the top of a tree, and thankfully, unlike Breath of the Wild, you can actually balance on top of a tree to get your bearings, and then jump to another cliff. And it all feels very fun, but without all the stressful resource management and weather management that you might have to deal with in Breath of the Wild. Now, I do feel like the draw distance could have been better. Like when you try to look too far into the distance, there's this yellowish orange hue that kind of prevents you from being able to see as far as you would in the games that inspired it. I feel like they're trying to adhere a little bit too much to the art style of A Short Hike, because that game had a similar problem, but the difference was that that game was from a top-down perspective, so it could kind of get away with that. But in a 3D game, that's not so easy. I also found that sometimes it would be a bit hard to figure out what you needed to do next. Not gruelingly challenging, but there were a few points where I was like, why is it that I'm not able to proceed in the main story? And it turned out that I was supposed to help a certain number of NPCs in an area, and because the game didn't have any kind of quest marker like most other action adventure games, I had just completely forgotten about it. So I kind of wish that maybe the game had some kind of menu to allow you to keep track of what quests you were doing. Now you might be wondering, can you beat the game pacifist? Because if the enemies don't attack you, then surely you can just leave them alone, right? Well, for one, they're just cardboard cutouts, they're not even real. But you do get confetti for attacking the enemies. Sometimes you get it for cutting the grass as well, as is typical in a Zelda game. And the confetti is basically your money that you'll use to purchase various equipment. Now, most of the equipment doesn't really matter. Like, all of the swords are exactly the same. They don't really give you any additional benefits besides just looking cool. You can also dress yourself in different hats, different shields, and for the most part, they're pretty much identical. Like, the trampoline shield makes a bouncing sound, but I don't think it actually makes you bounce any higher. Even some of the items blend together. Like, some projectiles are just variations of an existing one. So really, it's all up to how much you want to customize. And I think the game may have even also been inspired by Animal Crossing New Horizons, as you can craft things, but it's not nearly as involved. All you have to do is have enough confetti, go into the menu, select what you want to craft, and just pay the amount of confetti to make it possible. So the game really does not want you to feel frustrated, and unlike New Horizons, it only takes a couple of seconds to do so. Now, the writing in this game is a little bit hit or miss. On one hand, it is very whimsical and is probably something that you would expect in, say, A Short Hike, New Horizons, maybe a little bit of Undertale. But at the same time, since most of the characters in this game are children, I feel like a lot of the writing was just so childish, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean, literally, it feels like stuff actual children would say. At times, it almost seemed a bit incoherent, like they were trying to capture the imagination of children, but I was just zoning out because I kind of wanted a bit more nuance. Near the end of the game, it got significantly better, especially when there were some story moments near the end where I was like, oh, that actually is slightly emotional. It's not just constant gags all over the place. Where the writing was strongest was when it was self-aware that it was a Breath of the Wild clone. Those were by far the highlights. And whenever the adult characters were on the screen, it was definitely nice to be able to relate to them needing to do important stuff, but the kids didn't realize the urgency of their jobs and are trying to beg them, like, just stop your grown-up stuff and play with me for a bit. Very relatable, considering that I have 5 nieces and nephews at the moment. But apart from those small gripes, Little Gator Game is quite fun. It really demands hardly anything of the player besides being aware of your surroundings, since there's no in-game map, and manually keeping track of the side quests yourself so that you don't try to wander around and save side quests for the last possible minute. Now, I got this game on sale for about $11, but again, due to various factors, I paid a little under $2, and I think that's a pretty reasonable price. I think the most I'd ask for this game is $15 or $20, because it doesn't nearly have the story or the music or the grandiose of the Zelda games, but yet it presents a more childlike interpretation of those games, and I think that's good for players that don't like the stress that comes with some of those later Zelda games. And hey, there's massive DLC coming, so you could always prepare for that somewhere along the way. Now, before I wrap this up, I would like you guys to hear what my editor, Esabelle, has to say. She does not play games as much as me. She claims she's not a gamer, but she plays Beat Saber and Five Nights at Freddy's VR, so take that what you will. Hopefully you'll enjoy her unique perspectives. That's all from me for now, so until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Over to you, Esabelle.
Hey everyone, it's Esabelle, and my hat is falling in my face. Or should I say my colander. Paul asked me to do a review of the Little Gator Game from a non-gamer's point of view, so I'm sorry that it's going to be quite limited. All I have is the reviews that Paul has sent me and asked me to comment on the game from what I can see. So, I'll do my best. By the way, do you like my makeshift little gator sword and the little shield made out of a pan lid? Paul wanted me to purposely make it look like something a kid would put together, so thus the colander on my head that kind of went with the green color scheme. So, Little Gator Game, I can't comment the best on gameplay because I've never played it and I'm not a gamer in general. VR does not really count toward classic gaming, and even then I don't think I play enough to be a gamer, but I will do my best based upon what I've seen. It looks easy enough to control, it doesn't look excessively complicated, and my hair is all over the place. From what I understand of the game, it's a sandbox game, which for some people, that is their thing. There is nothing wrong with that. I typically have to have an objective for me personally, or else I'm not happy. I want there to be a fail-lose or something that I know that I could do better. I have to set up at the very least, like if I were to play this game, I'd be setting up personal goals for myself and targets for myself to meet in this game, because I would feel a little bit listless without it. Again, not everybody is like that, and if that's your thing, nothing wrong with it. As for visuals, I think that they do a very good job of capturing the youth in the style that they present in the game. It looks like one of those cartoons that you would watch whenever you're a little kid growing up. It looks very tame, very cute. Again, not exactly my personal cup of tea, but there is nothing objectively wrong with this style, it's just a preference thing. The review that Paul sent me did introduce me to the fact that you can have a pixelated version of it, which to someone who has been a gamer for quite a while and has seen classic pixelized presentations from games, I could see where that would be very nostalgic. For me, I would prefer it non-pixelated. The music seems to fit the game very well, very cute, very lighthearted. It keeps the viewers engaged, but also it has a very calming effect to it, so I think that the soundtrack is great. I think that the characters are great. Again, it harkens back to classic children's shows. To have anthropomorphized animals, classic Disney, you see this a lot. I think that they really nailed the vibe that they were going for. Because it's a sandbox game, I don't think that it's necessary to have as many save points. I don't know what the save points are in the game, or if it's autosave, but I don't think it's a big deal because of the type of game that it is. As for the plot, from what I understand from the review, you're trying to recruit characters to create this adventure for the main character's sister. Again, Again, I think that's a very cute concept, and it does harken back to the type of audience that it's trying to get. Overall, I'm not sure that this would be my type of game. However, for what they wanted to create, and for the audience that they had in mind, I think that they did a phenomenal job with this game, from what I can tell.